So to this point, we've been hearing projects about very tangible aspects of sustainability, right? Stormwater and food. In this next presentation, we will hear how leadership bears on sustainability. So please welcome Anne to tell us about that project.
Hi, a little shorter. My name is Anne Rosenblatt, and I'm here on behalf of my Capstone team to present our project on identifying key traits in local governance for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, were agreed upon by all UN member states as a call to action to prevent poverty, protect the planet, and ensure peace and prosperity by 2030. These ambitious targets will require advancements in technology, financial resources, and innovative thinking from all members of society. Effective implementation of local-level initiatives will also become increasingly critical. Our client, the Division for Public Institutions and Digital Government, or the DPIDG, focuses on promoting best practices in public governance for achievement of the SDGs. They also focus on SDG 16, or peace, justice, and strong institutions. One of their key initiatives are the UN Public Service Awards. Each year, governments from around the world submit applications highlighting new initiatives or exciting projects within their regions. The UN then selects from these applications winners and finalists each year. This information and these applications are compiled into databases that the UN holds. The purpose of our project was to identify institutional traits, leadership competencies, and environmental conditions that enable the successful implementation of SDGs at the local level. What we really wanted to do was find out what enabled these local governments to be successful in rolling out new projects in their regions. So the first thing we did was a literature review. We looked at existing frameworks and definitions in order to come up with a list of traits that we felt was most important to the success of these projects. The 17 traits that you see on this slide are what we developed and what we find to be most important to successful project implementation. So how did we do our analysis? We started by looking at the UN PSA database. We started with over 3,000 projects in that database, and we wanted to further refine this list to be able to look more deeply into certain projects. The first edit that we made was looking at just projects that were winners or finalists from each year. The next refinement that we made was looking at projects that had been implemented for 5 or more years, and projects that focused on a geographic scope of local or regional. We then developed a survey. The survey consisted of 35 questions that tied back to those 3 key categories that I had presented earlier. And the projects were sent out to the 67 projects that we had refined our list down to. We received 15 responses, and from there selected 10 projects to conduct case study research on. The case studies were meant to verify the traits that we felt were most important to the success of these projects. So now I'm going to go through a couple case studies and show to you some of the information that we were looking for and highlight examples that display the traits that were most important to these projects. The first case study is the Victorian Rabbit Action Network. This project enabled a platform for community-led action for managing the overpopulation issue in the Victorian region of Australia. And so a few of the key traits are shown on the slide here, the first one being effective stakeholder engagement. The whole point of this project was to bring together experts, industry experts, local community experts, government experts that all have different perspectives on how to manage this issue. Next was relying heavily on strong technical expertise, not only the experts that I just mentioned, but academic researchers. A Penn State professor was brought in to help with the initial framework of the project. The second case study is the Water and Sanitation Management Organization, or WASMO, and the government of India initiated this project to enable local communities to design, construct, and manage their own water and sanitation infrastructure. Early on, the government brought in professional NGOs that they felt had the most relevant background and strong technical experts to help with capacity building and providing resources to these local communities. They also relied on public-private partnerships and brought in private corporations where they felt that this would provide further resources for these local communities. Integrative policies were also important to this project because the government not only wanted to enable these local communities to manage their own infrastructure, but they wanted to develop the trust and transparency of these local governments. So just by looking at these two case studies, we can already start to identify common traits among them. After completing all 10 case studies, we were able to identify 6 traits to be common among the majority of our projects. These 6 traits are listed on the slide, and as you can see, they fall within the 3 different categories that we had framed our analysis around, showing us that each of these higher categories were important to the success of the different projects that we looked at. We also think that these would be the 6 traits that the UN should really focus on when promoting public governance and the implementation of the SDGs at the local level. So we didn't only want to present the UN with these 6 key traits. We had some further recommendations on how they could slightly tweak the existing UN PSA process. These are just small recommendations that we think would help them to further promote implementation of these projects and advancement towards the SDGs. The first one is to develop some sort of feedback mechanism in order to track these projects over time, and that way they could get an update on the status and the success of these projects. The next one would be to standardize the applications. This way, the application questions would have some standard responses that they could more easily analyze and review after they receive the applications and over time. We also think that the applications could be more clearly linked to the SDG targets, and that way they can track the progress towards particular SDG targets. And lastly, we think that creating some sort of knowledge-sharing platform for the UN PSA applicants would benefit these local governments and allow them to share strategies that were successful for them. So thank you for listening to our presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, questions for Anne. Sarah.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you so much. Being introduced to this project back at the midterm briefing and now revisiting it again, it seems like it was a really big or broad undertaking. And with that in mind, I'm just curious, what was the most challenging part in the research aspect of your project?
Yeah, so I think that my teammates would agree that trying to narrow our scope of our research was difficult. It's a lot of projects and a lot of information about these projects, so finding outside resources and finding examples of these traits within the project was really critical. I also think that we had to focus on trying to analyze kind of the framework of these projects rather than the success of the project themselves.
And how do the traits that you came up with, the big list in the early part of your presentation and the 6 at the end, how do those traits compare to the criteria that the UN organization uses to award projects?
Yeah, so we didn't get a clear answer on exactly the criteria that the UN uses in order to select these different projects. We did do a literature review which included looking at UN frameworks for leadership, and so I would imagine that they'd be similar, but I think we looked at a broader category, and I think they brought us in to try to help them narrow down kind of the scope of what are key traits for success, so hopefully they use it.
That was great. What's the most effective thing that Victoria is doing to control the bunnies?
So that was an interesting project, and it's a pretty successful project. I think that really just bringing together all the experts, this is a problem that doesn't end at property boundaries, so making sure that everybody's on the same page as far as how to manage this issue and different strategies was really critical for them and continues to be critical. So I think bringing in just everybody within the community and making sure that the government's on the same page and these local community experts are on the same page is really what helps them to succeed.
Okay, Anne, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.